Hi there everyone, so my name's Lauren and welcome to my webinar. Today I'll be sharing my personal account of successfully making an application and securing a place on a teacher training course. Please feel free to add questions in the chat box. However, if you are watching this as a playback, you won't be able to interact in that way. However, do you have any questions off the back of the webinar, then please do feel free to get in touch with Careers. So let's get started. Today's learning objectives are to cover the resources and websites that I personally found useful in assisting me to learn more about teacher training and to make an application, how I made a great application, and what to expect at interview, including adaptations which might be around due to COVID-19. So there's lots of resources and information online about teacher training, and I found by putting together these links here in this presentation, it just clusters together the ones that I personally found to be really valuable. So the website that I thought was the best about information related to teaching was the Get Into Teaching website. So that is linked at the first bullet point at the top. Now, there's loads of features about this website, and I could do an entire webinar of all the great stuff about the Get Into Teaching website. So I do recommend taking an explore. But some of the really great tips that you can, information, that you can get online there is there's information on life as a teacher. So it gives you really valuable insight about the profession. It gives you info about eligibility criteria, funding. It literally is a one-stop shop for all things related to teaching. You can also learn about the different routes into teaching on there as well. So I personally, while making my application to be starting in September, decided to go for a schools direct route, which was just a personal choice. I wanted to have more sort of hands-on experience in schools with kids. I liked the idea of, if you will, learning on the job. I liked that sort of idea. So which is why I chose that. However, I'd recommend going on there and looking at all the varying routes to get into teaching. And I think by learning a little bit more about each one in particular, or maybe two, will probably jump out at you. All courses naturally include time in schools, but how much time you spend in schools and how the placements are arranged and who provides the training is different depending on the different routes. So do take a look at that. Another service that they offer, which I personally used and I absolutely loved and would really recommend to others, was that you can register for an advice and information service, and it is completely free of charge. So I use the service personally, but when I made when I registered, I had already chosen who I thought I wanted to make applications to. So I chose my providers, and I was quite a way down with making my application and putting together my personal statement. However, you can register for them and they can support you from the very beginning of the journey. So once you go onto the Get Into Teaching website, there's clear links on how you can register. Once you've registered, then it will say, could somebody give you a call, and you can book a time slot where you'll be available. Someone gives you a quick call and they talk about really general questions. Like I said, had already made my choices of where I wanted, what providers I wanted to go to make my applications to. But they could give advice on that. And we talked about the different routes, so salaried or non-salaried routes into teaching, and they advised what might be best for me, the subject that I want to teach, and the area that I want to teach. So it's really, really informative, but also quite relaxed. But definitely an environment where you can ask as many questions as you possibly like, and there's no judgment whatsoever. Once I had that initial telephone call, it was about 10 minutes long. They then asked if I wanted to be assigned an advisor. Now, this is a fully qualified and experienced teacher who has got huge volumes of experience in guiding people through the teacher training application process. I was assigned a lovely lady called Cara. They passed my details on to Cara and she dropped me an email arranging to give me a call. On the first call, it really just was me talking about where I was up to in personally for me in my application. It's a really bespoke service. I talked about I'd picked my providers. I talked why I'd chosen those providers and why I'd chosen those options. I talked about my personal statement, which at that point I had completed and was about to submit. I had worked with a career advisor on that, so I felt really confident and with that, and I'll touch on working with a career advisor later on. And so I felt really confident with that. But she did offer to take a look at it for me and she could support me with that. If I hadn't had started it, she could support and guide me in getting going with that personal statement and she could have reviewed it for me should I have wanted her to. After I made my applications, I quite quickly was invited for interview. So it was the day after my applications were submitted. And I got information about what was required for that particular interview. I then later on that day got another invitation for another provider and they wanted a slightly different, they were having a slightly different interview, slightly different interview prep. And I'll be completely honest, at first it was a little bit overwhelming. There was quite a short time frame. They usually do give you a week, as whether what was offered to me was slightly shorter. I think that was due to the fact that it is coming sort of to the end of the academic year and they're wanting to do quite a quick turnaround for those that are applying into teaching. So yeah, they do usually give you a week, but I was quite overwhelmed by the varying different tasks I will touch on later on in the webinar. And it really helped me. I just emailed all the information straight over to Cara and she looked through and then we had a telephone conversation that was about an hour long and we discussed going through each different interview for each different provider, what is it they wanted from me, top tips, help and support. And we went through it interview by interview, task by task, which was brilliant. And I really, really enjoyed that. I felt like it was really important for me to go through that with it and avoid being overwhelmed by the experience. She was absolutely brilliant when it came to things like lesson planning for my proposed lesson. I went through my ideas, we discussed them together, she grew and developed them. So again, I think that the quality of the interview that I produced was definitely benefited by the interaction that I had with her. So I would highly recommend that service. They can also, which is worth noting, help you in arranging your school experience, which is a great tool if you're wanting to apply for the next academic year as well, because having experience in school can really help support your personal statement and can really help you in interview as well. So they can support and assist you in getting that experience in schools. Moving now to the bursary and scholarships. So the link within the presentation is also in the Get Into Teaching. It's a link straight to the Get Into Teaching website for the bursary and scholarship page. Again, what I love about what they've done with that info, it's condensed on one page and it shows a table and a clear indicator of if you're entitled to a bursary, if you're entitled to a scholarship, and it's broken down by subject. The bursaries and the scholarships are fabulous. For myself, I am a career changer. I do have a family and a house, and I've got bills and financial commitments. And for me, I was personally eligible for a bursary because I'll be doing religious education at secondary school. And for me, that bursary is going to help support me in undertaking the teacher training, for be able to take out that time out of being in employment and to go back and retrain. So I would highly recommend go and have a look, seeing if you're entitled to something and what that might be. There are scholarships and bursaries available up to the value of £32,000, and that is tax free. So there are some significant sums there which could really support you in undertaking your teacher training. So it's definitely worth taking a look what is available to you. Again, within the website, and the third link of the bullet point is about subject knowledge enhancement. So if you sat there thinking, I want to teach a subject area, but my degree isn't in that chosen subject, this isn't necessarily an issue. You could undertake a subject knowledge enhancement course, we call it an SKE, and these are available to people whose degree, like I said, isn't in the chosen subject, but it is closely related. For people who have studied the subject at A level but not at degree level, have an unrelated subject but have relevant professional experience in the subject, or it's been time since you've used your degree knowledge. So SKEs are fully funded and you get £200 per week if you complete the course. And course lengths vary. So I am personally completing an SKE. My degree is sociology, so it is related to religious education, and I do have a A level in religion and ethics as well. So I need to spruce up that subject knowledge. It was over 10 years since I completed my degree and even longer that I completed my A levels. So even if my degree had been in religious education, it's probably likely I would want a little bit of a refresher on that subject knowledge anyway. So for the RE ones that I took a look at, there was not any longer than 8 weeks. However, other subjects do offer long SKEs and all of them are paid £200 a week. So varying amounts available there. And mine, if I'm being honest about what my commitment is, I would say that I'm committing about 10 to 15 hours per week. But like I said, it's a very personal thing, and how much time it takes you to complete the work per week will vary. But for me, it is about 10 to 15 hours per week, and I am thoroughly enjoying it. It's picking up on areas that I now think, oh, I did know about that. I've quite a lot of knowledge and that just needs brushing up. And then there are other areas for me that it wasn't an area that I studied at A level. It wasn't a particular topic within that subject area that I'd studied. So it's quite new and fresh information. It's presented in a really easy way. You do get an online tutor assigned to you, and you do have sort of one-to-one online lessons. So, and it is a very bespoke service. They do make an assessment of what your knowledge is and then provide you with a subject knowledge enhancement course that is related to the gaps in your knowledge. So do not be fearful if it's been a long time since you've been out of education, or like I said, you feel any of the other categories, you may have picked a different subject and you want to teach in another area. That could be fine. And SKEs, there's lots of information on the Getting to Teaching website about that. So again, do recommend having an explore of that as well. Then finally, the last bullet point is a career advisor appointment. I 100% absolutely advocate you to book a career advisor appointment. I worked quite closely with Paul Martin, and he worked with me to develop my personal statement. And he really supported me in the initial framework for the personal statement, and then later reviewed and gave feedback for me as well. I did have a slight issue with word count, and so he helped me reduce that because I had so much to say, and his support was amazing. I will suggest as well that the career advisors can also provide mock interviews, which is brilliant preparation for interview. The support is amazing and it could offer two things. One, it can really polish up what your answers might be, because you may give an answer in the mock interview and they could feedback on how you could develop that further, give suggestions. But also, I think it can really just relax you. It can make you feel really more confident about how you might go about answering those questions, and you could go into that interview with just a slightly more positive frame of mind and slightly more relaxed. Everyone does get nervous at interviews, but having that practice before can really help. So moving on now to application. So I just put together a few little top tips on the application itself and how I went about doing it. So like I said, I worked with Paul to develop that framework, and he sort of helped me to guide me into what I would need to have on that. And I think those bullet points really do sort of highlight and show what that framework is. So why teaching, why that subject, and what can you bring to the profession? What experience might you have? That might be experience in schools where you've done some volunteer work experience. It could be with a sports club, for example, or for me, I regularly worked with students as a career officer here at UCLAM. So I had a lot of experience there, and I drew that experience in as well. So there's lots of different areas you can get experience from, and sometimes it is about thinking outside the box if you've not got any direct school experience. But I think really what is key here and what shouldn't be overlooked, and don't overthink it, is why are you so passionate about being a teacher? You wouldn't be making an application if it wasn't something you wanted to do. So really get that passion down on the paper and show how you could make an impact on children's lives, and how you might go about doing that. I definitely recommend completing a few drafts, and do get somebody else to read it through as well. So for me, it wasn't just Paul that had read through it. I did get some family and friends to read through it as well. I often think that once you've been working on a piece of written work for a while, you start to read what you want, what you think is there, as opposed to what is actually there. So things like spelling and grammar mistakes, you are applying to be a teacher, so you need to be mindful that grammar and spelling should be near enough perfect for that. And again, getting somebody to look over it can help with that. Also, as well, just sentence structure, just making sure everything makes sense. That can come from just somebody just taking a browse through your work. But top tips for this would be liaising with either a career advisor about it with an appointment, or alternatively, as I mentioned earlier, where you can get the information, advice, support through the Get Into Teaching website. They can also support you on your application as well. But just think, why do you want to be a teacher? Why do you want to teach that subject? Moving now to the interview. So once I'd made an application, I was invited to interview from a number of different providers, and I undertook interviews with different providers before making my selection of who I wanted to take up an offer with. Now, each provider did in fact want a slightly different preparation, and it did undertake an interview in a slightly different way. And it is worth mentioning at this point that because of the current pandemic, what was often found in teaching interviews would be that you would be asked to do a mini teach to a small group of children. Naturally, that isn't going to happen at the minute because a lot of children aren't actually in school. So each provider will have adapted their process in a slightly different way. What one of my providers asked me to do was to do a 5-minute video as if I was teaching to children. Another provider asked me to create a lesson plan, send that over prior to the interview, and within the interview then I did a presentation on my lesson plan on why I chose to do those different activities, and I was asked questions around it. So do bear in mind, they may ask you to do slightly different things. If it's make an application for next year, chances are, or we do hope, that the world will be a different place, and it's probably likely that you will be asked to go into a school and teach to a small group of students. Other things it might actually do, so they might actually do tasks. So I was given a subject knowledge audit. So it was a couple of questions about my subject area that I completed. There was a literacy task as well, which all providers that I interviewed with asked me to complete. Usually this would be sort of a timed in exam condition type task. However, as mentioned, because of the current climate, how they went about doing it was to send me over an article. I read an article, and then at the end of the interview, one was by video, one was by telephone, I was given 30 minutes to write a piece of written information in regards to that article, and then I was to scan it or take a picture of it with your phone and email it over. They do give you slightly longer than 30 minutes because you just need to take the picture, you need to be able to email over and bits like that, so you need to be using technology as well, but it really should be a time task, and it should be something that you do as an individual. And then also other areas of the interview is an actual interview itself, so I'm asking you questions about teaching. And I think what I took from it is I noticed a pattern on some common questions that were asked amongst the different providers I had interviews with. Main question being, why teaching? Which I think is a given. You'll be really shocked if they didn't ask you that at interview. So why do you want to be a teacher? And remember, well, why is it that you're passionate about it? Deeply think about and reflect on why you want to be a teacher, and sort of maybe sort of put together an idea of how you might answer that prior, which is what I did. Why that subject? So for me, it's religious education. Why is it that I want to teach religious education? Again, that was asked in all my interviews, and it makes sense. So why would you want to be a teacher, but why do you want to be a teacher in that subject? Again, it's about passion for the subject. Why do you want to share that information with students? Why would you want to spend all day talking to students about that particular subject area? What is that? Other areas that they asked questions in relation to, another was what I could offer a school outside of my subject area. So that was really focusing on extracurricular activities. Um, I used to be part of a drama group when I was younger, so I spoke about that. I also spoke about how I'm quite a keen netball player, so I'd happily get involved in that. But also as well, how I would be quite keen to get involved on trips, and how I talked about from my experiences from school how I absolutely loved going on school trips, and the different places that I went, different countries that I went to with fellow students, and how much I enjoyed that and how I would want to bring that experience to children as well. Another question that I found was quite common across the different interviews was what I thought the value of a personal tutor was. So again, I think that is really important to have a think about what you think the value of personal tutor is, and maybe you could think of a way that you might want to answer that as well. So there were some common themes that I personally found across the different interviews. And like I said, when you do a mock interview, if you want to do a mock interview with a career advisor, then they'll pick up some other common questions that are often asked as well, so they can be really valuable. So moving on, I would say what to do next. What action should you take if you're wanting to teach and you are having some serious considerations of teaching? Remember, it is not too late to make an application and to start in September. Providers still do have places, but act fast. I would say check out the presentation recordings from our teacher training event. So it was a virtual teacher training event that took place last week. All the recordings are held online and will be gathered together with all the other webinar recordings. So I'd recommend taking a look at them. We had 7 different providers come along, and each provider presented, apologies, and some of the insights that was offered in those presentations would be amazing to take on board when making your application. Some of them are for particularly making an application to that provider, but often a lot of them are talking quite generally about making a teaching application, a teacher training application generally, and what they like to look for, or the do's and don'ts, if you will. If it's not this year, maybe it's next year. Start to remember that it's not too late to start thinking about options and where you could gain some valuable school experience, as this could really support your application and your interview as well. So start to make those connections, start to network, start getting in touch with people and schools once they go back in September. So as I mentioned, this is likely to be a recording of you watching back. If you've got feedback, we are super keen just to get an overall understanding of what you think about the online learning sessions that we're providing. And if you can offer any improvements, anything you would like to see in the future, whether it's a certain area that you want us to provide webinars on, then again, please do feel free to share that with us. And finally, like I said, please do get in touch. If you have got any questions off the back of this, get in touch with Careers. The email address careers@uclant.ac.uk is on screen, as is the telephone number 01772 895858. You could also book appointments and have access to a lot of our online resources at Career Edge. And you can also interact with us on our social handles with Facebook and Twitter. Thank you so much for listening. And like I said, please do get in touch if you do have any questions. I hope you found it to be valuable. And if you do make an application to teaching, then good luck. Thanks. Bye bye.